Hello everybody and welcome to Unknown Charlotte. We're just two regular blokes discussing this 308 GT4 Dino. It's Steve Matchett and I. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Thank you for inviting me down to your wonderful workshop facility. Now,
It's our pleasure.
tell me a little bit about this car. Why are we looking at it today?
Well, besides the obvious mustache choice for this car,
Because of its date, you mean?
yes, the 70s and the 80s, I don't know, don't make any judgments on it, but it's a weird thing I wanted to compile with the car. But
alright.
the reason this car exists is, well, actually, you're more versed in the era that this car came out in, because from what I understand, you were working at the dealership when this car was brand new and coming in for service.
Yes,
and seeing
well,
dealerships.
they were still very current. I was working at Ferrari after these cars arrived, but I have serviced many of them, restored a couple of them, so I'm very familiar with the running gear inside these cars. And fundamentally, there is very little difference in the running gear between this and the perhaps more popular 308 GTB GTS, the Pininfarina cars.
That's the later cars, right? Because as
Yeah.
far as I know, this is a Bertone car.
Yes, that's
The later
right.
cars are Pininfarina. They start
Well,
to get
yeah,
more.
I think Bertone only ever produced like one or two cars with Ferrari,
Ferrari,
but
yeah, right.
this is one of them.
It's got very wedgy Lamborghini cues, if you will. Well, that's how he
Yeah.
became famous,
Well,
right?
there is a story to that in terms of aerodynamics. Really.
There is.
And I can tell you that from my Formula One days, that really there are two schools of thought in terms of aeroflow around the car.
Okay.
One is to make the car very Dali-esque with very flowing lines on it.
A lot of swoopy lines.
Like the GTS, the GTB Pininfarina cars, right? That's one method of looking at airflow around the car. The other method is, like you described, Bertone with Lamborghini styling and with the GT4 styling, is to keep the car very angular and very square. Now, actually, both of those treatments work very well
Oh, really?
in their own right.
Oh, okay.
What you can't do, and Formula One sometimes mess this up with a couple of designs, is you can't interchange the two. You can't use some of the lines being angular and some that sort of Dali-esque flowing, because the air gets confused very quickly.
Huh. Steve, how do you reckon they figured that out in the 70s? They didn't have...
A lot of it was just trial and error.
Yeah?
It really was. And you would put cars onto a test track, and you would put those little wall telltales across the car. So then you would run the car and film it and look at it, and you'd see what was happening with
Oh, wow.
how the string was moving, how the wall was moving across the car.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, it's
So this is a byproduct of some function, but some styling that started on paper first.
yes, and I'll tell you, it's easy to be somewhat critical of this shape when you look at I'm a big fan of that GTS GTB Pininfarina shape. It's a beautiful shape, but this actually works very well. And I'll give you one example from first-hand experience of driving both of those cars when I was working with Ferrari in England. The GTB and the GTS, when you're running at relatively high speed on the freeway or in England on motorways, you probably experience this yourself. The front end starts to lift up a little bit.
yeah.
You get a little bit of that buffeting because the air underneath the front of the car doesn't know how to get out of the car. Which is why when you look at race cars and you see those louvered flaps that you put over the fenders to vent the air out. One of the shortcomings really of that Pininfarina design, and it's only a minor complaint, just occasionally you get that, you can feel it doing this. This car doesn't do it.
Does it all act like a spoiler?
Well, it's just
ducting down?
the air manages to escape from underneath easier on this design than it does on the Pininfarina design. Both great designs. Again, they both work very well, but these cars are wonderful to drive. They're just like driving a go-kart.
I would agree with
the
that.
steering's very solid,
Yeah.
right? And you know what? It's very responsive to steering as well. You want to turn left and right, the car will do what you want it to do. It's very well balanced.
No power steering, just a steering rack,
No.
you and some suspension, and that's all that
Yes.
meets the road.
Great. It's got great weight distribution because you've got the V8 transverse mounted in the back.
Yeah.
So you've got great weight distribution because of that, and the layout works very well. The tubular chassis, which we'll probably have a look later on, is also very good at keeping the
Yeah,
car stable.
we'll get it up on the lift and
Keep
we'll
it
take a
solid.
look at all that.
But it does. It's very responsive, and it does exactly what you want it to do. I feel, personally, I've always been a fan of these cars, I must say. Even back in the mid-70s, mid-80s when I was working on them, these cars have been seriously overlooked by the Ferrari market. In the same way that the 246 Dino for years was overlooked by the Ferrari market.
And look where they're at now.
And look where they're at now, $250,000 cars and north of that.
Yeah, I think $500,000 is where everybody sits comfortably with those now, which is bonkers to think that car,
These are going to go the same way, I feel sure of it. Because it's a great car that's been overlooked.
This is the car that bears the Dino badge, which is basically a continuation of the 206 or the 246.
Yeah.
You know, we had one of those. We had the pleasure of working and actually getting one of those in original shape. It was mechanically completely redone, but
yeah,
it was original. And this is kind of the opposite tale. This car has been completely redone. It was actually restored in New Mexico, and then it lived its life abroad in Dubai for the last decade. And now we imported it back. Euro Prestige Imports got the opportunity to import it back. We did it during COVID, so that means you get a quote of X amount of money and you end up paying 3 times more because shipping costs went through the roof during that time. So we didn't do good in that timing. But as a final product, we're lucky to be representing something this beautiful. But to your point, this car is, I think, one of those cars that the market said, it's a Dino, it has a Dino badge, it's not a true Ferrari. And now that we're really looking back, it had more real DNA than maybe even some of the modern cars do.
Yeah,
so.
And when we put it on the lift later on, Marcel, when we get it up in the air, we'll see that actually the underside of it is very similar in layout. Torsional rigidity from the chassis, it's very similar to a 246 Dino.
I think they figured out something that worked for the road and they kept doing it. I've been under a lot of 308s and 348s, even up to 355s and 360s. Mm-hmm. They all have the same kind of tubular, angular chassis.
It works very well, it's very solid. And you'll see again that the suspension is set up with shims in the same way that the Dino was set up with shims.
Steve, do you know up to the 458 they have shims
it's
on the
great,
control arms?
Right? It works
they don't
very
change
well.
anything that works.
Why would you change? I mean, it's basically like that great quote, I think it was from John Madden in the NFL. He says, if you've got a play that works, don't change it until the defense stops you working it. Then change it. But if you've got something that works, just keep running it. And it's the same with this. If you've got a design that works, tweak the shape, but fundamentally keep the engineering of the mechanics the same. Why would you change it?
Now, there's a weird connection with this car. Steve happens to be in motorsports and Formula One. He's been that way through his career, but there's actually a story in which we've got an email that the historian that authenticated the original build of this car is somewhat related to you. Tell us more about him and what connections you guys have together.
Well, we'll show you that. We'll take a shot of it. The letter by Tony Willis, who at the time, I think when he wrote that letter, was running the Ferrari archive for Maranello concessionaires in England. I used to work for Tony Willis. In 1989, we were both at a BMW dealership. It was Cooper's of Rothley in England. And Tony Willis was my dealer principal. And I worked for BMW for exactly 365 days. It was exactly 1 year to the day. And I was having a conversation with Tony towards the end of my time there, and he was saying, he liked what I'd been doing there, and he was thinking of other ways of using me within the company. And I had to stop him and say, Tony, I've had a great time with you and I've a good working relationship, but I've just been offered a position with Benetton Formula One, and at the end of the month, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you my resignation letter because I'm going to work in Formula One. Well, Tony was actually thrilled. Oh, great, you're going to work in Formula One? That's fantastic. And wished me all the best. But we stayed in touch ever since. And then a couple of years later, Tony Willis quit his role with Cooper, BMW, and went to run the Ferrari archive down in Maranello concessionaire. So we've stayed in touch ever since. So as soon as you showed me that letter...
Yeah, this is the letter in question here. We're going to pop the trunk because I have a booklet on this vehicle and some of its history is quite interesting. Yeah, and it's basically him from Maranello concessionaires just going over all the documentation of the chassis, engine, and gearbox.
And I tell you, even before I'd read the letter, I saw Tony Willis has a very distinctive, beautiful signature. And as soon as I saw it, I recognized that anywhere. And sure enough, it's Tony Willis, a letter from Tony Willis saying that the car is exactly what the car should be, correct? Read it to us.
Yeah, it basically says October 30th, 2020, to whom it may concern. There's a reference of Ferrari 308 GT4, chassis number, engine number, gearbox number. We confirmed the above Ferrari was manufactured by Ferrari SpA, Maranello, Italy in 1979 for the US market. Original specification was Rosso Chiaro, and then they've got the paint code with beige, and they've got the code beige hide and tan carpets. Yours faithfully, Tony Willis.
Yeah.
What are the odds?
Well, and the great relevance of this documentation from Tony, working with Maranello concessionaires from the archive. Here it is at the top, look, from the Maranello concessionaires archive. If you want to check that you've got the correct engine number, the correct gearbox number, and the chassis number, they all tie up, that alone is worth its weight in gold. If you have that, it's of great value to the value of the car, because that's come straight, effectively, it comes straight from Maranello. That information is legit straight from Maranello.
You see, the funny part about this is that this document was an inquiry from the previous owner of the car, which is Tomini Trading LLC, and that's in Dubai, where we imported the car from.
Right.
So 3-4 years ago, they were wanting to see the origin stories of the car, and extensive service records, both on the performance and restoration side, are here. But can you believe that this ties you into that? I can't even imagine that, but...
On a slightly philosophical note, I will say, and we've chatted about this before, it's like, it's always worth protecting those relationships that we have and share through life, because they will always help you.
You never know how they're going to connect.
We talked about that with my last little book about kindness and Formula One, A Day at the Races. It's the same thing. Be kind, try and remain friendly with everybody, because it will always come back to your favor if you can help one another.
Yeah.
So that's how it is, right?
That's not a car lesson, that's a life lesson.
It's a life lesson, yeah. But great deal of respect for Tony. He was a great guy. And I wish him all the best, and I'm so thrilled to remain friendly with him. And actually, when we were just talking about him earlier on, I said, yeah, I know Tony for years, and I had a look at my contacts in the phone, and it's still in my phone. So it's good that that contact's still there.
Weird small world.
Yeah.
Steve, when you were working on these, what was the common problem that they were coming in for? I mean, if we look at this example, it's a little bit of a beautified one. There's no way any of that stuff was this good looking from factory. The time,
right.
If we're gonna step over here and look at the engine bay, but basically you're looking at the carburetors that have been completely rebuilt. This engine has had some internal treatment, so now it has a bigger displacement, has modern AC compressors, modern stainless steel exhaust headers, modern coilover suspension, a little bit of upsized wheels. Smaller wheels were what the standardly came with, but there's so much little what I call OEM plus upgrades on these cars that if you don't know them, you would think this is normal. But you know, to someone like you who's seen them in their bare stock form, this is a little bit kind of beautified, right?
There's really two schools of thought at this point in Maranello's history. There will always be the Ferrari collectors that want the car exactly as it left Maranello on the day.
Sure, yeah, I get that.
And all of that documentation will be in the Classique section of Ferrari.
Right.
And you can get in touch with them, and they will do a Classique search on the car, and they will give you that Red Book certification, but it must be exactly as it left the factory.
Every part, every hardware.
And actually, this car is a classic example of that, because let's say that this, in our wildest dreams, let's say we were looking at a 250 GTO right now. Okay?
Wow.
Let's just say we were. That car would be precisely as it left the factory.
Has to be.
Okay, it has to be.
Has to be.
And these cars, in contrast, and we just talked about it, because they've sort of been overlooked for a period of time, folks have been enjoying them. They were affordable enough to be able to change parts on the car, take it to the track, have a track car built, or
they became drivers and you can modify.
Yeah, and you can do all sorts of things with it.
Yeah.
But once that price starts to go up and up and up and up and up, they will get to a point where the next owner is going to say, please put it back exactly as it was. And that's what the Classique section at Ferrari can do for you. But I don't see there's any harm having these modifications done to the car, providing that we keep a record of them.
For sure.
You know,
everything has an invoice here. Everything has a major expense behind it, all that. But I like the fact that they just basically said these were the weak points, and as I was repairing, I might as well go ahead and change them out. Simple stuff like the headers being ceramic coated and completely redone. I mean, the factory exhaust kind of withers away, especially if you have it in a steel was not stainless back in those days, so you would have to kind of replace that every 10 to 15 years.
And can you remember when we were talking about the 246 Dino on the lift, and I said one of the weak points is always that the front header or the front manifold will always start to give up because it's the most awkward part to get at. Everything that we talked about on the Dino, we could say on the 246 Dino, we could say exactly the same on the 308 GT Dino.
I mean, if you squint, they're very close to the same thing.
They really are.
You see two more cylinders per bank, but you know, that's how you kind of get the evolution of the car. You get the bigger engine. I think this car is what set up the famously known Magnum PI 308s and 328s.
Yeah.
This car was the setup for all those cars because
It absolutely was.
it wasn't an 8-cylinder car until this car.
And actually, you know, again, if you looked at the running gear on this car and you looked at the running gear on the Pininfarina car, which came after it, there's a lot of interchangeable parts on that car for good reasons. But again, in terms of the weight distribution around the car, remember you've got 2 fuel tanks split left and right.
I just now noticed that.
Port and starboard on the car, exactly the same as we had on the Dino. Ferrari mounted the engine transverse because it moves the weight of the engine forward, which is a great thing to do. So the weight distribution, see, if you had an inline engine, the engine's going to be further back, probably about 6 inches. You probably get it lower in the chassis.
Yeah.
But if you can get that engine further forward, do that. So it's got great weight distribution, 2 fuel tanks to help with that as well. So all in all, and that great, again, the aero works very well. The inlet to the carburetors, it's fed through, you know, the vents on the side, and that all works very well. And we have that magic 1 choke per cylinder setup as well. With the number of cards we've got on it, which is the perfect, you know, it's the ideal solution.
For air to come in and have the right mixture.
Yeah, it works very well. So the carbs on idle, when servicing these cars, if you have the air cleaner off and the car is just ticking over and idle, it's a beautiful sound.
It is.
It's a beautiful sound, right?
I think there are guys who remove the airbox when they go on Spirited runs because the way that it sounds without the restriction of the filter housing is just insane. I've heard some of those YouTube videos. It sounds super guttural, very racy. And
it sounds a bit counterintuitive as well, but when you're working on the carburetors and setting them up correctly at idle, you'll just occasionally get that small spit of fuel come back. But it's not a fault. It means that it's working very well. It's actually working as it should do. And to me, it's a unique sound on these V8 Ferraris that I've never heard anywhere else. I mean, all engines have a distinct sound, of course, and you know, whether it's a V8 or a V6 or Jag engine, a Lamborghini engine, doesn't matter. But the V8 Ferrari engine running on carbs has a very distinctive, really attractive sound at idle when you're working on it.
Yeah, I agree with you that the 246 was one of those cars that let me have that as an intro, but then into this one, just more of it. There's more high noises, more high-pitched noises, the V8 versus the V6.
It's a very, again, I started working on road cars at 16. 1979, 78, I was starting to become an apprentice mechanic. So my initial training was always on very analog machines. And you know that I'm a fan of Second World War Jeeps because they're analog. So I've kind of gone full circle. I loved working on analog cars because they're like the perfect mechanic's car. Right, like everything, you can fix everything because you can see a fault and fix it.
Right.
Where modern cars, completely different prospect, but if a circuit board goes down, well, you know, you kind of, what do I do with that? Well, just change the circuit board. So
what's Alienware for guys in this era as a technician is Alienware to guys now.
Right.
Because if I give one of my technicians a carburetor, we're going to be here a while. Because when's the last time anybody rebuilt a carburetor? You know? And these things aren't exactly simple. These are Webers, so they're kind of the most complicated, best performing ones you could get.
Yeah, so there are 4 downdraft Webers on it. I remember, right? Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah. I'm looking at them from here.
Yeah. So when they are set up, and they're a little bit of a pain to set up, but when they are set up, they work very well. But I love that. I love it for that reason. Again, I've worked on any number of sophisticated engineering solutions, and Formula One obviously was very much the state of the art with state of the art materials all the way through my F1 career. But I always have a soft spot for analog things. I like it, and this is a perfect analog car to me.
I'll tell you what, there's not many of these that you could have the opportunity to work on, hang around with, drive, even kind of get the feel of what it was in this era. But when you get one of these and this shape, I think it's a huge privilege, honestly. But you also, on this particular example, you also get to see what we talked about earlier. Guys who would want to make better or improve upon stuff they were replacing. I mean, case in point, it's everywhere, right? You see the wheels, they've been bigger, wider, so you get a more traction patch. You go inside, there's block pont. old school track radio, but with the equalizer that shows you the ability to adjust the music. It's got big block pont speakers and tweeters. None of that came as a thing that Ferrari wanted to integrate, but yet, you know, someone who wanted to drive it and enjoy it more, those were the weak points for them, so they improved on it so they could do that.
Sure.
And when we get underneath, we'll see the suspension, we'll see the chassis and all that, but there's little tweaks here and there that just lets you know that this was a loved-on car that got restored and upgraded. I'm not going to say it got made better, but I just said it got made to the client's taste at the time, you know?
Yeah, and again, because of the car built as it is, any of those modifications, if a new owner wanted to take it back exactly as it left the factory, that can be done. It's not a drama at all.
He's 7 to 8/10 done here, though. The problem with these cars is when you leave them and don't do anything, and they kind of need so much work that they don't, you know, they basically will start to cost whatever a restored one will. Look, let me show you inside. We're gonna take a peek inside and look at the radio system here. Steve, this ought to bring some memories, because back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, block pont was the radio to have.
It sure was.
Look at that equalizer.
Yeah.
And tell me if you know what this is, because there's this cartridge here that's installed, and it has like a leather pouch. I don't know if this is to put your cigars or if it's to put your glasses in it.
It looks like a cigar case to me.
Right? If someone really needed to enjoy their cigars.
Actually, it smells of cigars, doesn't it?
It just smells like leather.
I'm getting pencil shaving. I'm getting cigars from that.
Oh, okay, so it's a cigar, a custom cigar holder?
I think so.
So someone was into it.
Yeah.
Steve, I also want to show you something which I found really interesting on this vehicle.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull out the Dubai registration and the Dubai transportation records. Also the booklet if you want to get into details with me. But here's the guide to using your RTA Dubai transportation, kind of like a sun pass, kind of like a highway pass.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
and it's got it on the windshield. But look how it comes in Arabic.
It's kind of cool.
And in English. I just can imagine driving this through the Dubai highways and just, you know, beating up on the car and actually enjoying it.
I'd say all of this is a part of the car's story.
Yeah, yeah.
And you showed me the letters earlier on, and all of that documentation is good. Any documentation you can have with a car is good.
Yeah.
Right, because it tells the whole story of the car. Yeah, it's like the old, you know, the original build sheet you used to find in some of the American classics. You know, if you can find that, terrific. But all of that stuff that you've got there is wonderful.
This is the graphic equalizer for the block pont unit. Block pont from the Bosch Group. Oh my God, look at that wiring maze.
It's great. It's all valuable stuff.
Again, you're right. It just keeps painting the picture of what the car is.
Yeah, it's all valuable stuff. And this is the original holder, is it not?
This is the original booklet, owner's manual cover.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember this sort of slight suede feel to it as well.
Yeah, it almost looks like the mouse hair stuff that they had in the 246.
Yeah.
And then look at this. How fancy is that? You get your Ferrari owner's manual wrapped in this with leather.
Yeah, that's exactly as it left the factory.
I know Louis Vuitton would want some of this.
Yeah, it's cool.
Should we go ahead and put it up in the air so we can see the actual underpinnings of it?
I would love to get underneath and you show me the underside of the car. Yeah, I'm very excited by that, really. You know.
No pun intended. Now that we're underneath the vehicle, Steve, let's take a look at some of the components. I mean, you and I have been here before. It's very familiar to both of us, but for our viewers at home, the same transaxle transmission that exists on the 308, 246, and even the later 348s, they're all kind of the same, and it's a great setup. Here we've got the transmission sump, we've got the oil sump, and then the transmission with the transaxle, which basically means a transmission that converts the powers to the rear wheels all in one unit. So What do you think about being underneath this? Does this kind of remind you of like when you were working on them and at that time that you were servicing them at the dealership?
It really does. And again, it's a very logical way that Ferrari have built everything at the back here. See the diff housing at the back. Again, think back to when we were looking at that 246 Dino.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same layout. It's something that worked very well. Drive shaft split left and right going to the rear wheels or the rear axles. And then that wonderful overlated tubing for the chassis,
right,
which gives the most maximum torsional rigidity on that axis.
Yeah, this was around from the early 70s all the way until actually the 50s, because our 250 GT Pininfarina has the same tubular design, and it carries all the way into the 90s.
It works very well. It just means that you can use a smaller cross section of tube here down that axis, so it enables you to fit everything into that relatively confined space. Because if you wanted to make that completely circular, if you like, round tubing,
it takes more space.
It would be a lot beefier to do that. But it just doing that, making it overlated, gives a lot more strength that way. And then we see this. We were talking about it earlier on. The tanks, fuel tanks, split left and right.
Yeah, it's a full shot right here. You can see the underbodies of it. You could actually have very easy access to the fuel filter right here. So, you know, service-wise, this is meant to be a kind of a gimme. You know. I really like that the engine mounts are right here. Everything here, you could also goes with the theme of the car. It's all been restored, so all new hardware everywhere, kind of in the places you expected, you know. Everything that's been touched, you kind of get new hardware on, so it's nice to see that. But I really like the fact that because it was kind of modular from the Dino days, it's still, you know, you don't have to have a manual to work on this. You can actually just get to it and get to work.
It's very logical, it's very straightforward, and again, it's no surprise coming from Maranello with their racing heritage, but the car is built like a race car.
Yeah.
And we talked earlier on about the shims for the suspension on the rear.
For the alignment and stuff.
For the alignment,
and
again, you know, if you look at the number of shims left and right, if you've got symmetry there, it's a very good indication that the chassis hasn't been tweaked or bent or any way. And the car is very symmetrical. We know that it's been set up. The corner weights have been checked on the suspension. We have documentation to prove that. So we know that the corner weights are right, which is balancing the car not just across the axles as well, but across each corner of the car, which, you know, it takes time to do that. On a race car, it's a lot easier to do that because you can adjust the pull rods or the push rods on the suspension just slightly to give the equal weight on each corner. But to do it on a road car isn't as easy. So if you've got good figures of corner weight on a road car, it's very indicative that the chassis is straight, which is obviously very important to the car.
And I think that's a standard in race cars when you're in competitive application. When you're doing it for a road car, it's because someone's going above and beyond of an alignment, you know? They want more performance out of
Well, in
setup.
a way, I would suggest that, yes, in a road car, you're probably not going to feel the difference. I get that. I can remember Riccardo Patrese, when I was working with him in 93, we were working on this is a slight different story, but it goes on to what we're saying. Riccardo Patrese, when we were working on the active B193 Benetton car, we were setting the corner weights to plus or minus 1 kilo across the front and rear axles. And Riccardo, who had come from Williams, was very used to the active Williams system, which was incredibly successful. He said, I can't even feel it below 5 kilos. You know, you're setting it to 1 kilo crossweight. I can't feel it on the track. So that's what we're doing in Formula One. But in terms of road car, doing the same thing on road car, it confirms that the axles are not bent, not twisted, all in alignment. Exactly. That's more the reason for doing it. So yeah, you may not feel it on the track, on the road in this car, but it'll tell you that the car's true.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Over here you can see the stainless steel exhaust. It meets the factory headers, but right when we have new shiny stainless steel, that's the more modern aftermarket stuff. And then if you look under here, you can see the collars for the coilovers. So again, they're Bilsteins and they're the right orange color, but because, you know, they're being upgraded, so to speak, they're a little bit different than the factory conies that came from this car. I'm sorry, it's not Bilstein, it's Coney.
Okay.
So yeah, you see right there?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting that they kept the style of the old Coney, but they put new threaded collars on it.
Right.
Do you see it, Steve?
Look, so that will enable you to move those spring packs around, and that
height,
it's great.
Spring dampeners, all that
exactly
stuff.
that. Yeah.
And if you move forward, I mean, similar treatment as a 246. It's all covered under trays from this era.
Well, just before we move forward to that point, remember what we were talking about?
The coolant lines. They're infamous coolant lines.
The coolant lines are going through the car, through that central chassis tube there. So again, the coolant lines are lost to view from there right up to the front of the car with the rear
So for
pier.
those that don't know, this is a very important serviceable item because what happens is, as they age, the rubber deteriorates. This is all made out of an aluminum material, so it's all metal. But what you have all these junctions is they age, they wear, and they start to seep and leak. And effectively, to service them, once you do that right, you have to run them across the whole center tube part of the chassis.
It is a bit of a nightmare. And
Steve's nightmare.
what you would find is if these cars were left for a long while, not used, they would pit through here. You'd see
corrosion
you'd
right
see
there.
corrosion there, and it'd start to leak. But
look how virgin that looks, which is nice. And then I see brand new clamps, brand new hoses,
yes,
brand new
brand
everything
new rubber hose at the top. So fortunately for us, someone's already had that nightmare at some point in the car's past and saved us.
And
the
look,
trouble.
I think about stuff like that as this passageway for the handbrake goes through here. Look how new that looks, which is so nice to see.
Yeah.
It just means whoever's going to own this car is not going to have a headache or homework to do on their side.
Fuel balance pipe, again, very similar to what we're talking about at the Dino. Here's the drain bung. If you wanted to drain both tanks together, you can do by taking that bung out there.
I like that they thought of this stuff. They made it serviceable.
Yeah.
God forbid you ever have to do any of this stuff. It's there.
I know.
You don't have to tear apart 10 parts of layers of things to get to it.
Another nightmare was actually taking the fuel tanks out, and that's the same on the Dino as it is on this 308 Dino.
It's probably the
effectively.
tightest corded things.
It is a bit of a nightmare, but again, they're great, so we can leave them. Instantly
They're
move
not
away
bladders like the F40s,
Right.
Jesus, if anybody knows what I'm talking about, that's basically they have a plastic liner inside the fuel tanks of the F40s, and you got to take those out every 10 years, and that's major ticket for a lot of those guys.
Down to the front, and again, exactly the same setup we see with the shims on the suspension.
It looks like they're the same. One shim per side, one shim per side.
That's great.
That's what we want to see.
Yeah, it's indicative that everything's just where it should be. And here we see once again the coolant pipes have finally come back into view. So you've got
to the radiator now on this side, right, Steve? Like this leads to the radiator.
Yeah, exactly. You've got front and rear hoses or top and bottom hoses. They disappear around, and the rad's mounted up here. But you can see, there is a long section of tubing here where you simply can't see what's happening inside there.
Yeah, I haven't had the privilege or the luck to do that, but I've seen how it gets done. And it's a lot of grease and a lot of patience.
I've had to do. I mean, I'm pretty much over it now. But it has taken 40 years. Oh. But I'm okay now. I'll calm down about it now.
You see, also one thing I just saw is you held your hand on the tire there. I saw the NACA duct in the brake rotor.
Yeah.
Look at that. Like, that's pretty cool. That doesn't exist on race cars or anything until much, much later. So you're seeing it on a road car now, which is cool. It's very cool to see that. 70s, you're having stuff like that.
There's something to be said for, again, that the height of sophistication is simplicity, and if it works, keep it simple.
It's the homage to your Jeep,
It really is, and I love to see that. I think when you have a really simple design that works well, you don't need to change it.
Well, it worked well for then, and this car weighs what? No weight at all compared to modern cars. So to have all this stuff is almost overkill, but at the same time what you want to see from a beefy setup.
Yeah.
And it allows some confidence in driving. I like seeing the steering rack here. There's no power steering or any lines in there, but the bushes are new, the hardware is new. It's so nice to see a rack that's been rebuilt and you don't have to worry about other components to it failing. So the simpler, as we talk about, the better.
Again, and it really does give to the driver a very direct feel.
Yeah,
when you're driving it, you've had that sense of feeling. You can feel there's a direct connection to the road.
Yeah.
Which is important. You've got to have that, really. And they did everything right back in the day when they were building these. Again, I've always been very impressed with them. We talked earlier on about how the Pininfarina cars would start to dam up with air. One of the key features, they're so sensitive to airflow, Marcel. All cars are. But if there's one key feature that stands in my mind from talking to the aerodynamicists at Benetton, they always used to say, you can't force air to go anywhere. If you try and force it to go left, it will do anything in its power to go right. It's just like herding cats.
Interesting.
You've got to just hint at where you want it to go. But once you get it right and you end up with a beautiful concept, there it is, and it works very well.
I mean, the only experience I have is sticking my head out a window at 70 miles an hour. That doesn't feel good. So imagine the challenge a car has going down the road.
It's a lot of simple. You just talked about the brake ducts around here, and it's very tempting to put bigger brake ducts onto brakes to cool them. But in terms of aerodynamic flow, it doesn't work. Again, the golden rule of brake duct design in terms of airflow is you have to have the exit bigger than the inlet. Otherwise it will dam up with air.
Right.
There's nowhere for it to go, it can't escape.
That makes sense.
So then it starts chuffing back out and you get that negative pressure. And that's what was happening with the Pininfarina cars, is there's nowhere for the air to escape. It's great design, but it could have been slightly improved on. And you'll also notice that, for example, if you're driving down the road in almost any car and you open the driver's window and don't open the rear window, you hear that, that's the same thing. The air's got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And so if you translate that to what's happening on the brake ducts or underneath the fenders for air evacuation, that's what it, air is a fascinating thing, but this car, I have to say, had it right.
Well, it's really cool to be able to share some of these memories and walking down to some of your memories of this car with you. I appreciate you taking the time and coming and look at it with me. We thank you guys for joining us, and if you have any questions about this vehicle, you can find it at europrestige-imports.com.
Are we done? Is that it?
I don't know. I worked it like that. We don't have to be done. We can redo that part over and over
No,
again.
I liked it. I liked it. That's a good ending, isn't it?